Hey, what's up, everybody? It's Matt from Rocky's War Room, and today I have another painting video for you. This time it's painting the Algoryn AI Bastion Heavy Combat Skimmer. Pretty cool kit. It's a brand new kit from Warlord Games for the game Beyond the Gates of Antares. It was really awesome to build. It was a lot of fun to build. So now we're going to get into the painting of it. Now here's the studio art, which has it all in red, and I chose a green and tan and black scheme instead. So we have all three weapons. I did not magnetize them. I'm going to separate it off and paint those separately from the Bastion itself. So we're going to begin with a color primer of Army Green. This is from Army Painter. It's kind of not a dark green, but more of like a military green. And in order to do this, it's a spray paint. We don't want to get the flight stand where it's clear at the bottom there, so we're going to just take some simple painter's tape, cut it in half because this was pretty thick, and we're just going to wrap this around the base that connects to the actual machine itself, which I did off camera here. I'll show you in a second. There we go. Of just the clear plastic. That way we can avoid hitting that really easily. So just with some simple painter's tape that you can take off later. And the base, it doesn't really matter. We're going to be flocking the base. You could cover that in tape too if you want to keep it clear, but I always do bases, even on these flight stands. So there you go. I sprayed the whole entire Bastion with this Army Green. I did 2 thin coats, not too heavy, and I also taped and did the spotter drone as well, and sprayed the weapons with the Army Green. So in the next step, we take our first accent color, which is Vallejo Monocolor Military Green, and we're just going to pick out some panels to paint this green with. As you can see here, I picked this panel here, down here on the wing, and for some reason I have a hard time staying on camera there. There we go. I fixed it. But I picked this panel out, and I picked this panel and the panel that goes up and around the driver housing there and on the wing there. Now this is just like an accent color. It just makes it darker. It actually brings out just different dimensions. So you're kind of picking out panels to have, a little bit of color variation in your greens. And military green is a pretty dark, like, Christmas tree or pine tree green. And the Army green, as you can see, is more of an olive, kind of like a pastel green. And this one's more of a darker forest green, I should say. So you just take your brush and you be as neat as you possibly can. Don't worry if you get a little bit on the other panels. You can always go over with the Army Painter Army Green out of the paint bottle, which is an exact match, which I have tested it and is an exact match to the primer spray. And also, I will say about the primer spray, make sure you stay a good distance, and it's not too humid, and it's not too cold when you're spraying it. Otherwise, you won't get a smooth coat. So the next step, we're going to take our black, and we're going to start marking out all the parts that we want to be black, like the inner part of the wings, which has the grid on the inside. And I'll show you what I picked out in black here in a second. So we got these vents we're going to paint black, and we also have the panels here that I was talking about. We're going to paint black as well on the insides here. So those vents, the insides of this grid in here. We're going to pick out this part of the driver's compartment. We're going to paint that whole thing black, and all these parts as I'm pointing out to you guys. And you can kind of look at the box art to kind of see where they painted stuff black, because I pretty much mimicked what the box art has, where all the black parts are. And I'm just kind of pointing them out to you right here, what I'm exactly going to be painting black. So, all right. So, all the black is painted on there. Everything that I want army green is going to be painted on there. And you have a little bit of the next color. Oh yeah, don't forget those underneath. You got a little bit of the next color already on there. But before we put that tan color on, we're going to be using a Citadel color called Athenian Camel shade. And you can actually use Army Painter's military shader as well. It's pretty much the same thing. It's just an overall heavy wash over the top of all the green parts. Here I started painting some of the tan, and then I realized, oh yeah, I got to wash it first, because if, as you can see, I get it on the tan there. I'll repaint that. That's no big deal. But you have to put this wash on before you move on to the next step, because you don't want to get that green or that heavy wash stuck all over the tan parts. And we're going to continue to just take this green, doing a heavy wash. Try not to let it pool too much on the flat surfaces. All you got to do is move your brush over the top of it. It looks okay in some parts of it. Don't worry about it if some of it does end up pooling somewhere. Just kind of pay attention and just run your brush across. As you can see, I'm not really concerned. I'm kind of going over some of the parts, but I'm not really concerned of small pooling. I just kind of dip my brush in that wash, and I just spread it all over the green and the black. It's okay if you do it over the black itself, it'll give it a small green tint, and it'll kind of blend it together. So it's a fairly easy thing to do. It's just a blanket wash over everything on the flyer itself. So as you can see, you do that over the whole entire thing, and you end up with something along the lines of this, all over the bottom and the top. It's just a straight blanket wash. So fairly easy to do. So our next step is to grab your US Field Drab model color. And now this part is our other accent color, where we saw the brown before on the other side of this machine where we started. We just kind of mix our paints, all of our paints 50-50 water to paint ratio. 75-25 sometimes, but for the most part, everything I'm doing here is done 50 to 50 water to paint. It goes on smoothly. You won't see paint strokes, and you could do a couple coats, and it's no problem whatsoever. It's pretty thin, and it goes on really smooth, and it looks good, as you can see right here. That's where I put all my accent color, which is my third color on the machine. Is a field drab, and over the green it kind of has like an orangish brown look, and the colors all kind of mesh together fairly well, as you can see right here. Kind of breaks up that green and black. And don't forget to paint the drivers too on the inside there. Kind of break them up the same way. All right, so our next step is to take a Russian uniform World War II paint. Now this is our highlight to all the green parts. It's an edge highlight, so you really just want to do 50-50 water to paint, and get don't glob the paint on your brush. Just put enough on there to make a mark, and use the edge of your brush. Don't use the tip. If you can avoid it, use the edge of your brush and just line all the hard edges of the dark green and the light green. And what this is going to do, it's going to accent those colors, make them pop out a little bit more, especially on the darker greens. But it also gives it a weathered look, like it's paint's coming off on the corners, or just giving it a good weathered look to it. And like I said, we're going to go over this entire Bastion, doing this, highlighting it up, accenting those colors. This is the most time-consuming part of the paint job, is doing this, but the result in the end is going to be very much worth it. It beats trying to layer colors on top of each other. You could actually use an airbrush to paint this machine, but it'd be more one of a color, kind of like how I painted that M25 Concorde ship in a camouflage pattern. With its edge highlighting and all this breakup of colors that I have, it's a lot harder to do with an airbrush. I'm not saying it's not possible, but this is how, before I even had my airbrush, how I painted vehicles and stuff like that. So it works out well. It worked out well then, works out well now. So, but like I said, this is going to take the most time. Take your time with it. Use the edge of your brush as best as you can. And the results will turn out great. It'll look really nice when you're finished, especially if you keep the lines as straight as possible, as I'm doing here. Even over that green, it's a much more subtle highlight, but it does show up. So the next thing we're going to do after you're finished with all that lining, we're going to take a little bit of off-white, just a little bit, possibly just 1 drop, to probably 10 drops of the Russian uniform green that we were just using. As you can see, it's a little bit lighter than the stuff I was using before. And this is going to be another highlight on the corners. And it's a little blurry there. I apologize for that. But as you can see, I'm just going over the very high corners and edges where we put the Russian uniform green. And this just accents it just a little bit more, makes it look a little bit more machine-like and weathered as well. So just take your time with this. This actually doesn't take as much time as lining it, because you're just going over the corners and the very 90-degree corners and curves and stuff like that, where the extreme light will hit those corners. So and remember, when you're doing this, don't put a ton of paint on your brush. I would dip it in the paint and kind of twirl it like as if you're trying to get a tip on the brush itself. If you glob it on there, it'll kind of look a little bit funny. Look like you just kind of plopped paint there, and you won't get the desired effect that you're trying to get out of it. Just putting final high highlights on all the corners. It goes fairly quickly compared to the other part. So now we're going to highlight up our US field drab, and we're going to take our green brown, and we're going to do the same exact lining that we did for the green, except this time we're going to be doing it for the brown color, the tan color there. And same deal. Try to use the side of your brush. If you have a very steady hand, you can use the tip. It doesn't matter. But we're just giving a nice highlight to this brown color and all the edges. And this won't take near as long because there's not as much brown, obviously. But you do want to be careful, because this second highlight of the green brown is, I'd say, more of a yellow color. So if you do miss the edge and stuff, you're going to see it. So just take your time and go over all the edges, and you should be fine. And as you can see, it's not a huge difference, but you definitely can tell when you hold it up to the light that it has a subtle highlight on it. And that's kind of what I was going for. It also gives it a weathered look as well. So our next step, we're going to do the corners, just like we did with the green, with a brighter color of Middlestone, model color Middlestone, Panzer Series paint. And this is a little bit brighter than our green-brown, and all we're going to do is hit the corners, just the very corners of, as you'll see here, the very corners of the brown, just to give it that little bit extra of a highlight, so it'll accent on those corners. As you can see, it's much brighter, but it'll give it a much weathered metal look to it, as if the paint was starting to fade, or, you know, kind of, just weathered for the most part. And I do this for most of my vehicles. Any color I put on there, I try to hit those corners. It really accents it. It really brings out the color of that you're putting on there, and it just kind of molds everything together. And of course, don't forget any of the corners on the Bastion there. I mean, as you can see, it really does bring out that brown, and when you're looking at it at the angles, it actually will give it a nice highlight. And as you can see there, I globbed on too much, but I was able to get it right quick with my finger. So as you can see, it adds to that highlight that's already down. So next we're going to highlight our black with some German gray, and we're going to do a combination of a couple things here. We're going to do some dry brushing and lining. So on the hard edge parts, like the driver's compartment there, or the flight compartment there, we're gonna do some edge highlighting with this German gray. And German gray it's a lighter gray, or it's a dark gray, but it highlights black very, very well, especially if you don't put a wash on it. But since we did here, it's not going to show up as much. But when you do move it in the light, you will see it as far with the edge highlighting. So it'll accent it just enough. And I use German gray on all my blacks, no matter what. It's just a subtle enough highlight to where it accents everything. That's black. And you could take it a step further and use a Luftwaffe gray, Luftwaffe camouflage gray, I believe it's, or Luftwaffe gray or something like that by model color. It'll add just a little bit brighter, and you can put it on the corners like you did for everything else. But I think that just lining it with the German gray like that is plenty. So now we're going to do that dry brush I was talking about. The same color, it's German gray. It just works well with these flat panels if you want to highlight them up and give them a little bit of weathering, just to accent that black. You want to get most of the paint off your brush and do a dry brush over the top of them with just dirty old brush that you got laying around would work perfectly for it. Or if you have a specific large dry brush or something. As you can see, it's not much of a highlight, but it is something, and it really accents it well on these panels, and you can see those panels a lot better with this highlight and this dry brush there. And we'll do it over dry brush the vents as well. So all these things we're doing, we're not going for a very drastic color scheme here. We're just going for very subtle color scheme. It's enough to break it up to where you can see the model itself and all its parts, but it's dulled down just enough to where it looks like it's camouflaged. So here's the finished product after we highlighted the black, and we went over, don't forget the underside panels and those rocket parts on the bottom. So we are going to now do our blue glow. We're going to start with dark Prussian blue, and we're going to do some base coats with this. Everywhere we have our blue highlight, our blue glow, like on the vents here, we're going to have it. This is just a base coat, so you can be a little sloppy with it. On the inside, you're not really specifically targeting one spot. Just the inside of these vents here, because the blue glow is, you want to keep that black on the outside itself. As you can see, I'm putting the blue in there, and it's starting to look a little bit brighter, that black on blue. And take your time with this. Like, you can be sloppy with the paint on the inside, but do take your time. Try not to hit the black parts. Try to be as neat as you possibly can. We're going to do this mag gun. We're going to base coat the inside of that. We have lenses. You got to remember to do the lenses. There's 4 of them total on the machine itself. And I'm getting the other side of that big weapon on the front. And we'll get the glow all the way around. So after you've finished all that, look at your box art. Don't forget the rockets underneath. You can tell where all the blue glow is. We're going to just take straight Prussian blue to highlight, to do the next highlight on top of the dark blue itself, the dark Prussian blue. And it's going to begin to do our blue glow effect here. And all these paints are watered down 50-50 with water. 50% water to 50% paint. And when you're putting it on top of the dark Prussian blue, you actually want to leave a little bit of that dark Prussian blue visible around the edges. You're not wanting to cover up the dark Prussian blue completely. You do want to use that. It's a step up color. The blue glow needs that other blue underneath, and they all blend together with a little bit of transparency because you're adding so much water to the paint itself. And the edges will stay dark, and it'll go up to bright very easily. It's a 4-step process. But these steps here, you just want to paint a little bit less and a little bit less each time. So the next color is deep sky blue. And we're going to do the same thing. We're going to leave a little bit of that dark Prussian blue. We're going to leave a little bit of that Prussian blue visible on the blue glow parts and the lenses and stuff like that. So I'll show you a little bit here. You want to hit the center. And you don't want to, like I said, you don't want to cover up the first 2 colors completely there. You're just kind of putting it in there. You're not doing it. Just be neat. Be really neat about how you do it. be really neat where you're putting this paint, because like I said, you don't want to cover up those first two colors, because all these colors will blend together as a one on top of the other, as far as your blue glow goes. So just continuing around, finding all the places. Look at the box art of where all this blue glow will be at, like the lenses and the rockets, the propellers or propellant rockets underneath, the engine part on the sides, and all the lenses. So, and now our next step, we're going to use the sky blue. This is almost finished. We got one more color after sky blue, which is going to be an off-white, but you're only going to dab that. As you can see, the buildup of the glow is starting to show here. We're just barely going to tip the surface with this sky blue, and leaving the previous colors underneath itself. As you can see, I'm barely touching it, and we'll look at the thrusters here and see what I'm doing with them. As you can see, I'm 50-50 water. I'm actually with the paint, and I'm not going around the whole entire thing. I'm just kind of touching spots and leaving that deep sky blue underneath that. And as you can see, we're starting to see that glow effect with the closer and closer that we get to the white color. And after you finish this sky blue, you want to go over with the white, and you just want to tap the surfaces of where all the glow is with the white, and there's the glow, as you can see. I'll show you underneath, and as you can see, our glow effect with the white works. So it's 5 stages. I think I said 4, but it's actually 5 stages. I forgot about the off-white that I use. So the engine compartment, everything, since the Bastion itself is just so subtle, the blue glow will stand out very well. So we're going to take our ash gray now, and what we're doing is the Algoryn signature triangle markings. And to do this, it's really simple to kind of map your path here by putting dots. So we're going to do one big triangle and one small triangle that connect in the center. So I put out my dots, and I just connect the dots with it, with a paintbrush in a line there, just like that. Boom, we got our triangle. It's fairly simple. A lot of freehand stuff I do with dots like this. I'll make a series of dots to make curves and things like that, and then I'll just kind of fill in the blank area with the paint and try to be as neat as possible with this step, as best you can. So we'll just continue with our ash gray, and we'll do our wherever you want your triangles at. You can make them thinner, you can make them thicker. The world's your oyster on this thing and what you want to do. So I put, I believe, 4 sets of them all the way around, or four sets of triangles all the way around. Yes, I did. There we go. So then we're going to take sky gray, and we're going to leave just a little bit, I mean a very little bit, of the edge of the ash gray by the Army Painter ash gray. We're going to leave just a little tiny bit, and we're going to fill in this inside of the triangle. We're not going for super bright white. So this sky gray is pretty much almost white. As you can see here, I'm avoiding the very, very edges, and I'm just leaving just a little bit of that edge, that ash gray that we previously put on. And it leaves a good accent for our white here. And there you go. This is probably the easiest part of painting this whole entire Bastion, is these triangles. Everything else had a bunch of lining and washes and dry brushes and waiting for stuff to dry. And by the time you get to your 4th set of triangles, the first one's dry. So I did this whole entire thing basically in one take. So it was pretty easy. Just connect the dots, fill it in, highlight it up with the sky gray. All right, there you have it. You have one finished Algoryn AI Bastion Heavy Combat Skimmer and his spotter drone. which is pretty cool. I have these other weapons, the other weapons options. They're on the painting table right now. I got some wash drying on it and everything, and the blue's done. They're completed. I would love to show you guys that too, but this is completely finished. You'll see pictures of the other weapons. It's pretty much done the same way, except the plasma one kind of looks like this one in the front, and the mag one obviously looks like a mag gun. We have all the, oops, this sucker, it stays on there as long as I don't flip it upside down. I did not magnetize this because it fits on so tightly, and I don't think it's really going to go anywhere. So there you go with the blue glow. We got the rockets, or the suspension system, how it stays up, the blue, the green, and not very hard to paint. They're actually fairly easy. I find most of the Antares stuff is not too overcomplicated. And with any paint job, it's obviously only as hard as you make it. So this one here, I showed you a real easy way to do it, with a lot of lining and some washes and a few dry brushes and some steady hands, like with the white triangles in here on the sides and stuff like that. So it wasn't too terrible. It actually turned out fairly nice. And this is the color scheme I picked. It's a very military green, military type look. I imagine my Algoryn have been fighting on this one planet for years and years and years. And it was an indigenous planet that had lots of jungles and plant life and stuff like that, similar here to on Earth from the 6th Age. So, and they've got left there, and they adapted to the area. So, I think the blue and the green looks well together, and I just didn't want to do red. So, you can do red. You could do the same exact thing that we did here with the red, just different colored reds and stuff like that, or the whole thing red. And I'm sure you've seen the studio art by now of this being red and on the box itself. But it's pretty easy, pretty cool looking kit. I'm very happy with how it turned out, and I'm going to paint all my flyers for the Algoryn exactly the same way. And the more you do, the easier it gets. The lining and stuff like that, and the more practice you get with the blue, you can do the blue glow and stuff like that, like these two lenses on here, and the rockets on the bottom and stuff like that. So it has a pretty cool looking glow effect going on there. So, but I can't wait to get it on the table and shoot some GAR with it. Maybe some Concord, or some Outcast Rebels, or some Freeborn, something like that. I think it'll look really cool. But that's it. There you go. There will be some still shots of it following this video. Thank you so much for sticking with me. If you haven't subscribed, please do. Please tell a friend. Please spread the word. I'd really appreciate that. Hit that bell. Leave me some comments. Tell me what you think of this paint job. And last but not least, from me to you, ta-ta! And we'll catch you in the next video.